move to appoint Tom McCann as the clerk pro tem.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your hard work on RCA. Next order is the consent agenda, town accountant's warrant, minutes of July 25th and August 8th. The gift acceptance to Carlisle Community Trust of $8,500 for the Council on Aging Volunteer Coordinator, Outreach Worker, Social Service Coordinator, and Benefits Costs. Friends of Sleepy Hollow, $5,400 for the design, selection, and purchase of plantings along Bedford Street. Concord Carlisle Youth Baseball, $7,700 for the purpose of supporting the fiscal year 17 routine maintenance expenses of the field. Concord Lions Club, $1,841 to purchase 7 new rescue vets for the use of the fire department. Friends in Service Helping of Concord Proclamation, 1-day special license malt and wine beverage license for American Legion annual picnic on September 18th at the Old Manse from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. The rain date being August the 14th. An all alcoholic beverage license for So Cold Wedding on August 27th at the Old Manse from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. And a Sunday entertainment license for the American Legion annual picnic at the Old Manse, 269 Monument Street, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. with a rain date of August 14th.
Michael, did you include the minutes?
I did.
Okay, so I move to approve the consent agenda as read with the exception of
With the exception of.
the July 25th and August 8th, 2016 minutes.
Okay, I see that they're crossed out over here. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A few things to report. The fire chief, in responding to a call in July, determined that the building at 91 Sudbury Road is dangerous, not structurally sound, and requested that the building commissioner, building inspector, take action on that. So a notice has been sent to the owner of the property at 91 Sudbury Road, a Cambridge resident, that he has a limited period of time to make the structure safe. It's unsafe both externally and internally, so anyone in the building responding to an emergency or otherwise, is at risk of getting hurt in the building. So we're taking action on that.
Notice was sent, or was it a constable?
The constable was unable to make service,
But an attempt was made
an
on
attempt
that
was made in 2 locations, and the certified mail was sent.
And that suffices?
And we'll see if he responds. If we don't get a response, we may have to redouble our efforts to have the constable provide in-person service. Public Works Department reminds folks that the water ban is still in effect. We're experiencing an extended period of drought. While most customers have conformed and responded and are allowing their lawns to brown out, the crew did an inspection Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of last week and found that about 250 irrigation system owners, not on private wells, but on the town system, were irrigating their lawn on a daily basis in violation of the ban. So letters will go out to those 250 homeowners, but the Public Works Department is saying by and large people are complying with the ban, and it remains in effect and will indefinitely until we get some rain. And the national forecast is for drought to continue through the fall. The governor signed into law the Municipal Modernization Act, generally favorable to cities and towns, includes the DOR recertifying our property values every 5 years rather than every 3, which will save some time and staff response to DOR. Easier approval of bills and warrants, payments by the boards, use of electric poll street list, electronic street lists for the polling locations, so they don't have to print out multiple copies of the registered voters. That can be done electronically, and with a not entirely beneficial result, the local speed limits. The municipalities will now control local speed limits, and in the past it was Mass Highway that determined what the current speeds were. That local boards, if asked, if there's a desire to do so. So we suspect there'll be a substantial number of requests to do that.
Do those come to us?
That's not clear. I think yes. I think it would be the elected officials get that honor, I think. The Nagog Pond Water Treatment Facility in Acton, the draft EIR, Revised Environmental Impact Report, was filed electronically today. I don't have a link for you, but it's a large document. I will provide that. It does eliminate the solar energy generating facility and to try to appease some neighbors that were unhappy about that. Town clerk reminds us that there's a state primary election on Thursday, September 8th. Therefore, the last day to register to vote is Friday, August 19th, and her office will stay open late on Friday in order to accommodate those who want to register for the primary. Oh, and lastly, the light plant did hit a peak last Thursday, which was one of those days we called for customers to reduce consumption. So it's likely that we shaved our electric consumption on the very day when it may be our peak electric consumption. That will save us money throughout the year. That's all I have to report.
Is the reservoir back up?
Water consumption is in good shape because of the general compliance with the ban. And we have one well currently resting, so we're not operating all of our facilities 24/7. We have it.
Will the fire chief mark the building so it is?
I believe that's his intention, is to mark the building at 91 Sudbury Road to indicate to emergency responders that the building's unsafe to enter. Yes.
Any questions of the town manager? Alice, Steve?
Any upshot from the forest, Happy Right forest fire?
We got a heavy rain just about the time the fire was going out, but the fire chief said that there were several trees, the roots of several trees got damaged badly, and the trees were actually killed, and they took the trees down so they wouldn't fall. So there was some deep fire deep into the roots, but then it was put out with the help of firefighters, fire departments from as far away as Hopkinton and Framingham and Natick.
So do we know what caused that fire?
He didn't offer an explanation.
Thanks.
Other questions? All right. Well, this is 2 meetings in a row that we'll be dealing with issues around the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So, Ina and Marcia, thank you for being here again. And would you introduce yourselves for the record? Sure. And then help us with this set of activities.
Mina Macarius, Anderson and Krieger, Town Council.
And Marcia Rasmussen, Director of Planning and Land Management, Town of Concord, and Project Manager.
Okay.
So good evening. Thank you for having us a second time. This is should be the last time on this set of issues. I'm sure there'll be other things in the future, but as we discussed last time, the state funding process involves requiring the town to acquire all the necessary property rights, both a lease and other property rights in the bed itself that will become the rail trail, as well as access rights on surrounding properties, some of which are state-owned, some of which are town-owned, and some of which are privately owned. Last week, you voted on the easements with the MBTA. Those have yet to be finalized, but we voted on them in the substantial form. The license with the MBTA for access rights on certain MBTA parcels, that is now final and signed by both parties. And you also voted to accept donations of rights of entry by certain property owners. Today is the remainder. So there are, as you see in the order on the agenda, first there's a 99-year lease agreement with MassDOT Rail. That is for the actual right-of-way. I can get into more detail before you vote on it, but the summary is that it's a lease. They will do the work, MassDOT will do the work. During that period, the town will not have access. Thereafter, it will be the town's leasehold property for 99 years to be able to use the trail for its intended purpose. That lease is final in all substantive terms. They are filling out cross-references and so on, and they will be finalizing that, sending us a copy to sign, assuming you vote to allow that. The second agenda item will be one vote to accept all of the private property easements, as well as a right of entry, another right of entry provided by the Department of Corrections at no cost. So those easements come in a few different flavors. You have, and I would actually like to take that item first, if it's okay with the chair, to skip to item number 5, because that will have to be that vote will have to be certified by the town clerk, so we'd like her to be able to go home thereafter. So if you look in your packet, there's a record of vote document as item 5. It lists 14 properties and then has subparagraphs A through D, so if everybody has the same document. So just briefly, the 4 items on here that we're asking you to accept in this one vote with respect to these, there are 2 properties that have granted a permanent easement. So those, one is 1200 Main Street, which will need a permanent easement for roadway redesign purposes. The other is 34 Williams. No actual construction necessarily is going on there, but it's a site issue, so it allows a safe site issue. So that's item A, is accepting those 2 permanent easements. Item B is to accept certain temporary easements. All of the properties, including 1200 Main Street and 34 Williams Road, involve temporary easements for access. So the vote there, you have 13 properties total. All but one has signed a temporary easement agreement in substantially the form the town had requested. There were minor tweaks on some, but nothing that we felt in consultation with the town manager and with Marcia and our own internal folks that substantially changed the rights that the town would have had under a taking or that the town otherwise would be fair for the town to have. Those individuals under federal and state law are entitled to compensation for those easements. However, not all of them requested it, or not, and some donated. The donations, in addition to the 3 that I think we discussed last time, are the owner, Digi LLC, the owner of 2B Upland Road, 74 Commonwealth LLC, the owner of 74 Commonwealth Ave, and then the owners of 30 and 40 Beharrell Street, and the Brookside Square owner, which is the owner of 50, 70, and 80, and the VOA Concord Assisted Living Facility. All of those have agreed to donate the costs they would otherwise be entitled to, with one exception. In full, one was a 2/3 donation out of a $7,000 compensation. They asked for just 1/3. So, we're grateful, of course, to those property owners. The others have signed, as I said, we have all of those documents in hand.
All but one?
All but one, which I'll get to in 1 minute.
Okay.
Yeah. So in your vote, you're still, to the extent that somehow happens, we do have to record these tomorrow, so it's unlikely, you would still be authorizing the town manager to sign a temporary easement even for that one. That one is, the property is 4B Commonwealth Avenue. That property, because MassDOT needs us to have the property rights in hand by tomorrow, by Wednesday, but effectively recorded tomorrow, we'll be asking you as item 7, I believe, on your agenda, item 6 on your agenda, to order a taking for that property. That property involves both a permanent and temporary easement, so it's actually going to be 2 takings. The permanent easement is, there's 2 reasons why we need to do a taking. One is the property owner, the town had understood the property owner was willing to donate that as a condition of various permits. The property owner is not willing to donate that, so the town needs to take the property. The compensation amount makes it so that taking is advisable over a more protracted process, which would require unnecessary steps through the procurement process. And the second reason is that advising taking, as I said, is just because there was an unwillingness to donate that and or to sign the permanent or the temporary easement, for that matter, on terms that the town could agree to.
We'll take these up separately.
We'll take those up separately, but that's why they're not in your main.
Got it.
While I'm on the topic, though, there will also be a confirmatory taking for 2 properties, which in substance says that you're taking it for all the purposes that they agreed to in the easement. Those are for 2 properties owned by trusts, where over time the trusts have, as well as we can tell from the Registry of Deeds, missed one filing or another, and to avoid any doubt as to ownership, they're well aware there's no extra money being provided, and there's no extra rights or benefits going to the town or the property.
Just for legal
For
clarity.
legal clarification to them and to anybody else who might have an interest in land mortgages, et cetera. So that's item B, that's that whole scope of the temporaries. As I mentioned, item C is the Department of Correction. It's accepting a right of entry. All of these is to authorize the town manager to sign. And D is effectively a reserve clause allowing the town manager in consultation with us to take all the necessary non-substantive procedural steps to do all this, so we can get that done by tomorrow. So any questions on this vote, which affects all of these property owners?
That's 4 and 5, okay?
That's item 5. So if you're ready to vote on it, I would actually suggest you do that, and then we can go to the next item,
Okay,
since that's a second.
I move to approve the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail review and approve orders of taking. Nope, I'm sorry. I moved
You want to do the lease, are we doing the lease?
number 5, right?
I'm gonna do that second.
Move to review and accept easement agreements received to date with property owners for properties adjacent to trail segment in Concord. Per the attached item 5, should I read the addresses as well?
You don't have to unless the board,
I don't think we need to. Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, before we vote, this is the one that contains the property that the property owner was unwilling to grant an easement.
in this vote, you would not be taking that property. This vote, you would simply, should there be a last minute
Okay,
change of
got it.
heart, authorize a temporary easement, not a permanent.
Okay. Any other discussion on this item? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you. And because that would have to be notarized, if I could ask that you sign that as we're going through, and we can run that downstairs
I
to
think
get
it-
certified, to have the vote certified. All right, stepping away from the private property owners into and I'll go back, I'll end with the takings. The second vote that I would like to bring to your attention today is on the MassDOT lease. And so I gave you a basic summary before.
Item number 4.
On item number 4, thank you.
Okay.
So you should have a vote in your packet for that as well. It's with 2 subparagraphs. So that lease will be, as I mentioned, 99 years. As discussed last time with respect to the MBTA license, this has been vetted by the town's risk management. It's been vetted by town council's office, and has at this point been substantively vetted by the T and the T's legal counsel, which we wanted to make sure before we brought to a vote. It is nearly identical to the lease signed by the town of Acton last year. I believe for this portion of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and perhaps for the Assabet River Rail Trail as well, because they both run through Acton. The highlights of the lease, as I said, 99 years. Construction happens by MassDOT. There are protections during that construction period for the town, since MassDOT understands it's doing the work. Afterwards, sort of flips and becomes mostly the town's responsibility. We were able to make sure that there's language in there that clarifies that both the town and the T are not waiving any, in terms of any indemnities they may have towards each other, they're not waiving any rights vis-a-vis public or third parties, so that given that this is a recreational use, the recreational use statute, which protects entities that open up land for recreational use, will apply, as well as the Tort Claims Act and everything else. So we think it's a sufficient lease. Obviously, as mentioned last time, when you're dealing with any of the transportation agencies, they start with a form. So it's not perhaps everything we may have wished for, but we think a good product at the end of the day.
All right.
I move to approve the lease agreement with Mass DOT for trail segment on Mass DOT property per attached item number 4.
Second.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
All right, and now the item 6 on here, on your agenda. So as I mentioned, we have substantive, as I would characterize, substantive and confirmatory orders of taking here. The only substantive order of taking, only property affected by substantive order of taking is 4B Commonwealth Ave. So it's a permanent easement for use of portion of the property as a bike path with an award of damages based on the appraisal at roughly $103,000. They also have a temporary easement for access as some of the other properties do during construction. That taking would only last 3 years, just as a temporary easement would, and then the town's rights would expire. And that is about $26,000 if I'm not mistaken. So those are the two substantive takings that I'd be asking you to vote on, and in this case, you have to sign them as well. So you would need to sign them and have them notarized, so hopefully we still have our notary here. Okay. So that's one vote. The other is a confirmatory set of confirmatory orders, and then in this case, I believe we have two for you to vote on. One is the two properties involved are 1200 Main Street and 1211 Main Street, which is a complete coincidence. Both owned by trusts, and in both cases, as I mentioned, there is a small title issue that we don't think actually impacts our our ability to be sure that who's signing has the authority to, but rather than put the property owners in the town through a much deeper title search, we thought that might be the appropriate approach. I believe the 1200 property also has certain utility easements and other things, so by having a taking, it clarifies the town's rights vis-a-vis those entities. The 1200 property is both a temporary and a permanent confirmatory taking, so there are two separate orders, so you'll need to vote on each of those. The 1211 is just a temporary, and so what we've done, so you'll have 4 votes total on takings. There are 2 substantive votes on 4B Commonwealth, and all, of course, subject to your motions, but and 2 for the confirmatory. One of those will be for the 2 temporaries together, and one will be for the 1200 permanent confirmatory. And so you should have, I believe, all 4 of those orders of taking in your packets.
We do, at least I do, yeah. Okay.
68 Commonwealth is a confirmatory order?
I'm sorry, and I should mention, so if you're looking at your agenda, there's a list of 30 Beharrell, 40 Beharrell, 4B Commonwealth, it's 68 Commonwealth. The agenda went to, was published before we were able to obtain signatures from 30 Beharrell, 40 Beharrell, and 68 Commonwealth, so those no longer need a take.
Okay, great.
So it's just 4B, 1200, and 1211.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so those were put on the agenda as a precaution, but.
Okay.
And I should mention the folks especially at the assisted living facility, very quickly got us signatures, which was quite a bit of work to do, so we appreciate that.
Okay, great.
Okay, sure.
I move to approve the orders of taking for.
And if I may, I would actually, I think for this, I would do it one by one for each of these orders, just so it's clear that each was
Okay.
separately voted.
Skip 30.
So do each one of those, starting with the 4B,
So we do 4B first.
which
and
is a substantive
68,
taking.
And then 1200 Main and 1211 Main.
12, sorry, say that again.
We'll do 4B, 68 Commonwealth, 1200 Main, and 1211 Main.
Not 68
68.
Commonwealth, but the other 3.
So I move to approve the order of taking for 4B Commonwealth Avenue, Concord, Mass.
Is there a second? When was it separately, did you say?
There are 2 of
There are
those, so
2.
just to be clear, there's a permanent and a
And-
temporary, so, yeah. So, sorry.
So it should say, review and approve the temporary order of taking first for 4B Commonwealth, and then
Okay.
second.
I move to
Motion.
approve the temporary order of taking for 4B Commonwealth Avenue in Concord, Massachusetts.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
I move to approve the permanent order of taking for 4B Commonwealth Avenue in Concord, Massachusetts.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then,
Before
Yeah.
before you go further, Mr. Amy, when you get to temporary, for the next 2, they're together, so it's just.
Requires one-
just to clear.
One motion for
Temporary
temporary.
1200 and temporary
okay,
1211.
and that's it for that one, right? Okay, so I move to approve the temporary order of taking for 1200 Main Street and 1211 Main Street in Concord, Massachusetts.
Second,
Second?
all in favor? Aye.
We have one more, which is the permanent for 1200 Main Street.
Okay, and I move to approve the permanent order of taking for 1200 Main Street in Concord, Massachusetts.
Is there a
Second.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oof.
Right.
Thank you for all the work on that. We're not done yet, right? We still have more on,
We're not
we
done
still have
yet,
more on
but
Bruce
we're
Freeman.
Sneaking up on it.
I hope the bikers appreciate all the work that's gone
Is that it then?
That's it for the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. The fun part, I guess, might be the next item, but for all of the parts that you need me for, I think.
The 24 Commonwealth Avenue?
Sorry, 4B is 24.
It's the
Commonwealth.
same.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Yes, I just wanted to say with respect to that, though, this was the property where the town thought it was receiving an easement on this property without compensation, and the owner informed us that that was not his view. Right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so this was, action was taken by the planning board and the zoning board of appeal with respect to certain special permits and the like. Is that correct?
That's correct, and so that, based on those actions, the town had expected a donation of that easement amount. The property owner did not agree to do that.
Okay.
And so what I will ask as, before you move on, is you should sign those orders of taking and have them notarized.
I think they've all been
They've already been signed? Oh,
Yeah, I think
that's-
we're,
Appreciate that. In that case, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Marcia, thank you too. I know, again, how hard you worked on this. Our next item, number 7, should be pretty easy, right?
What's that? Should we stick around for that?
So this is just to send letters of appreciation and thanks to the various property owners who have given us both temporary and permanent easements on their property to facilitate the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail.
There were 9 property owners. 3 of them actually waived the appraisal, and so there was no value established, but the appraisals ranged in price from $1,000 to $3,000. So it saved the town at least $3,000 to have them waive the appraisal process, $1,000 for each of those property owners. And then the other 6 property owners, as Mina outlined in the beginning, have provided a certificate of donation. I still have to get 2 of those donations, but most of them have signed their certificate of donation, and Finance Director Tony Legalbo has signed the ones that we have received. And then 1 donated a portion of their appraised value, so 2/3 they donated.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
I move.
This is a milestone for the project.
It truly is, yes.
Great, thank
And
you.
these will all be filed tomorrow, and
The hope is to have all of these on record, the things that need to be on record tomorrow. As I mentioned, we're still waiting on the final form of the MBTA license and the MassDOT lease from the Commonwealth. So once we have those, the town manager will be able to sign those. They also need to be recorded.
So the registry of deeds will be very pleased to see you.
That's right.
That's right. And then, once the checks are issued, hopefully before Thursday, I have to provide certification to Mass DOT right-of-way section so that we get our certification. That certification hopefully will be issued on Friday. And then this project will be advertised the following Saturday, August 27th. That's the time frame that was given to us by Federal Highway Administration. So we're up against a lot of deadlines, and I really appreciate the board's consideration of an additional meeting in August, so thank you very much.
Your pleasure. No, it's all of ours, I'm sure.
certainly entertain a motion then.
Yes, I move to authorize the chair to enthusiastically sign and transmit letter to property owners substantially as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Next item is the polystyrene committee charge. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Greatly appreciated. Alice, perhaps you should
Okay?
tee this item up.
So at town meeting last year, town meeting voted to ban polystyrene from retail establishments and for the use of takeout restaurants. And in doing that, the Board of Health really struggled with their role, as did the Department of Concord Public Works. And there's a split between what each of them are going to be doing on this. And the Board of Health has really asked that we establish a committee to help them make some really critical decisions about their ability, what constitutes a waiver, for one thing, in a request from establishment that requests one. What is a reasonable decision-making tool to allow that to move forward as a waiver? And they have asked for assistance from a committee to help define that. They've also asked that a committee work with them on defining what are the alternatives, because when they go in to do inspections of facilities, they want to be able to be helpful to show what are products that are comparable in price and durability that can meet the intent of the bylaw. And so what I've done is listening to the Board of Health and talking with others in town, have drafted a committee charge that would help do that. I have nobody in mind who could be on that committee yet, so we're going to need, if we approve this, we would need to think about how we're going to seat it. There would be a broad range of folks. The communications is key to the success of an implementation of the ban. So having businesses understand what the law says, help them find solutions to problems, and to help the Board of Health set up the decision matrix for when a substantial hardship has been identified for a business to comply in the first year or second year. We know from experience in Brookline that the first year there were a lot of requests for waivers. We're thinking that there may not be as many in Concord because there'll be some outreach beforehand, but also to develop the town's communication materials for educating businesses and citizens about what this law is about.
And where does that responsibility lie? The
Which
educational materials and...
So the Board of Health it's a split. The Concord Public Works has prepared some outreach materials that they've been working with the Board of Health on those materials that would be used. They've been working with the petitioner of the original article to come up with some of those materials, but the thinking is that the materials should be vetted in a wider scope with more involvement of citizens and how representatives from perhaps the business community, representatives, somebody from the petitioner, somebody from Public Works, somebody from Board of Health, all working together. And then the materials that would be ultimately produced would be a document that's been approved by the town of Concord. And so the charge basically sets that out. And I think that, was it included in the second round of our packet? I think it was.
Yes.
So it's developing the outreach strategy and providing the Board of Health the matrix upon which they can decide the criteria for granting a waiver to implementation of the bylaw. The bylaw that was approved carries fines. And so the idea is, let's try not to fine. Let's see if we can, find alternative products that meet the business need at little or no cost to the businesses and not have to issue fines.
I was on the Board of Health last year, and I know the discussions on it was that there was a feeling that we probably would benefit by having a year to review before it came into place. The town meeting did not follow that. But I think there was concern that things like Emerson Hospital, there might be a significant impact, that a number of the school system would have a big impact, as well as all the stores. My understanding was that a couple of the stores actually came out and said that they thought they could comply, but there's a concern about whether there were alternatives that were, in fact, economically feasible. And so I think that it needs we don't want to get into an antagonistic situation here. We want to try to make sure that if there are alternatives, everybody's aware of it and move forward in that regard.
And that list of approved or recommended alternative products would change over time, so we'd need to figure out, you've got a good list that we could put together by a committee in the first several months, but it would need to be reviewed and updated periodically because new products will come to market that'll meet the need. So this was, I don't know that we're voting, are we ready to vote on this tonight, or is this a discussion this evening for consideration? What do you say, Mr. Chair?
I'm ready to vote on this, but I don't think there's any great urgency if you think we would benefit by waiting until the 12th, but we've been talking about this for a while now, so
What's the committee breakdown again?
it has a representative from the petitioners, a representative nominated by the Board of Health, a representative from Public Works, and 2 members at large.
So the petitioner wants to be able to pick someone for the committee?
No, a representative from the petitioners. In other words, we would populate the committee.
Okay.
And we would choose from among the petitioners somebody to be on
Oh,
this
I
committee.
understand.
Yeah, I think that's what the
Yeah,
intent
that was the
was.
intent.
Okay.
So what's your thinking? Ready to vote or,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
All right, well, let's tee it up.
Move to adopt the charge for the polystyrene committee substantially as discussed and to begin staffing the committee.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I would encourage anybody out there listening who has an interest in this, you know the drill, right?
Yeah,
So-
green cards.
Green
Thank you
cards.
very much. for
And I would
that.
add that if they need, we've got January 7th, January of 2017. That's an ambitious time schedule, but they may need a little more, but they can always obviously come back and
Yep,
request it if
Sure,
necessary.
we've seen that before with other
Yeah.
committees, that'd be just fine. All right, well, thank you very much, Alice, I know this was, that
Thank you.
took some real doing to get done, so greatly appreciate it. The next item of business is the Wild and Scenic River signage request. I don't think there's anybody here from those folks tonight, but you'll recall that they had presented us with information along with the map about posting signs. I think they indicated their intent to post 4 signs, 2 down here at the Flint Bridge and 2 at the Lowell, bridge over Lowell Road. So we had a discussion of this last time we met, so I would like to continue the discussion, and I'll hear from you before I opine.
6, right? 6.
Say what?
6 signs.
6 signs?
Yeah.
I thought it was 4, but must have missed a couple. So does anybody have any?
Well, I think, as I mentioned at the last meeting, my concern is I do think there should be some type of, if you will, written understanding as to, as I view it, they plan to provide the material, but they're assuming that the town will be responsible for constructing or putting the signs in. And then I guess the question is, what happens after that, who's responsible? And I think there needs to be some type of a written understanding so that we're not left in 2 or 3 years, if one of the signs has some damage, what happens, who's in control?
That was certainly one of the concerns that we expressed. Their request was for DPW to install the signs
Yeah.
and maintain them. I think there was some question about that being raised in general, and especially in light of this triple P committee that's working. Any questions or concerns?
So I personally, my recollection isn't great, and I was going to see if I could do a little background. Didn't get around to it, unfortunately. If I recall from the designation period of the Wild and Scenic River, Concord was quite active in getting that designation approved. It required a submission of detailed documents. It required conversations among many committees. To me, it seems like a reasonable request that we demonstrate that we have an invested interest in the river systems that we promoted as to become the designated as a wild and scenic river. So I would support this recommendation. And having signs go up along the river and key intersections seems to me to be reasonable. I hear your concerns about maintaining the signs.
Well, I
have to
think
figure that
that
out.
concern could be handled in the content of a motion, that if we decided to go ahead with this, it would be the responsibility of the Wild and Scenic River folks to not only install signs under the supervision of the Department of Public Works, but also maintain the signs. I mean, that could be part of our approval, I would think. The other concern which I express, I'll express it again, is the precedent. This just sounds like a great idea. I'm completely all in favor of it, but what's going to be the next request that comes in for a sign to do whatever? I'm just concerned about that, and I don't think we have good mechanism to differentiate between signs that we may think are good and signs that we think are not so hot. So I'm a little worried.
And at the last meeting, there was a general discussion of the whole issue of signage and political content and other information, what can and cannot be kind of excluded, and I think that at that point that you.
Well, you're right, and then on the other hand, it's slightly different. This is a permanent sign.
Yeah.
And I think the bigger concerns about, not bigger concerns, but a concern about signage around speech and that is the notion of temporary signs,
Yeah.
right? Permanent signs have to have specific authority of the town to put them in public right of way, but temporary signs,
Right.
it's a little foggier, especially with this new article we passed at town meeting. So this falls into the permanent signs, and so, for example, with nothing intended, a church comes in and wants to put a signs up, the Rotary wants to put a sign out on the town border saying, we meet at Colonial Inn every Wednesday, or whatever it is. The Concord Business Partnership wants a sign up, and all of a sudden, there's a lot of signs.
You know, it's interesting. I understand that concern, but Concord, our citizens are so involved in so many things, and the effort to gain this status deserves recognition. And I think maybe signage is kind of a cyclical thing. I mean, a couple of years ago it was where there's too many. Now it's don't tell residents what they can or can't put out there, and I think it's something that needs to be presented, or at least people know that our resources are well taken care of and cared for, and I think it's important to have these signs out there.
Well, again, I'll just remind you that we are going to have a discussion sometime relatively soon in the fall about temporary signage, so there can be provided some kind of guidance to citizens in town about what is appropriate and what isn't. So that's going to be something we have to get up on the agenda.
I almost think I agree with you that that's a conversation we have to have, given the vote of town meeting and our discussions on the sound bylaw. But Chris, am I mistaken? Wasn't the designation of the Wild and Scenic River something that the town supported? The town actually submitted and signed the application for and worked with citizens and others, and Natural Resources was involved. So this is really a town-wide effort, which to me is a little different than a private entity who wants to put up a sign, whether it's the Rotary Club or somebody else. This is a town-sponsored federal government designation of a wild and scenic river.
My remarks about Rotary, no disrespect.
Yeah, right. No, that was just any single entity.
That to me is the issue. We can make some kind of differentiation between this perhaps as a town effort or a quasi-governmental agency.
Sure.
All right. Well, I think one thing that we all are in agreement, if there's going to be a motion forthcoming here, if we look at the motion that we have on our handout here, it reads to support or not to request of the town's assistance with the installation of river. I think the motion should read that we're granting the approval of the installation of these signs but that the applicant is responsible for installing the signs under the supervision of the Department of Public Works. And they are responsible for maintaining them.
So I don't know if I would agree with the installation. I think that's worth a conversation.
I think we'd
Oh,
heard from,
that they will install them? Maintain, I understand. I think we know how to put signs in pretty well.
We do. We have an individual who's assigned to doing that. I think Rich Rain's concern was that they are out straight doing work, cleaning catch basins, paving roads, and that it might be a winter activity. They don't love this, the idea of putting up signs for other people. They hope that this doesn't also become a practice. But if it's the board's wish that they put them up, they would ask that it be delayed until the things get a little quieter at Public Works.
So I see no problem with the delay, but I'm a little concerned with the language that they think it's an outside people putting the signs up. I think this was really an activity that the town supported and pushed through to get the Wild and Scenic River designation. So it was a town-sponsored activity. We have a committee, the Suasco Basin, to whom we have appointed a representative for the town of Concord to participate on. So I think it's not without significant town commitment. It's not a third party coming in and asking for a sign. You think it is?
Well, it's a federal agency, and they have regulatory authority, and Public Works Department is tied up, I think, with a couple of projects right now.
I'm not saying we need to do it today.
That they are trying to get a drainage project approved on.
well, let me ask the question this
Assabet
way
Avenue.
then. If we agreed to their request of having the DPW install them, but made it clear that they would be installed when DPW has the time to do that.
That would be great.
As opposed to, they think,
Yep.
Range would-
Public Works said that would work
and
fine.
what about maintenance?
I didn't have a conversation about maintenance. I don't know what that means. If the state snaps off one of these signs, plowing Route 2, for example, and it goes in the river, whose responsibility is it to find it? And that, or it gets just knocked over, it's still there. Would we reset those signs?
Vandalism, any type of them. And in other words, who bears the responsibility?
And the liability that if it isn't properly
Cost.
maintained,
Yeah.
and the cost and all that. So, I think Public Works is hoping it wouldn't get that far, so we didn't pursue it that far, but, if it's the board's wish, we'd maintain them as well. My concern would be about replacing, I don't know how, I think don't have signs for the Concord River, they have the Sudbury and Assabet, and they're on order, the other ones are on
But
order.
they showed us what they would look like.
Right, so I think there's some cost and some delay in acquiring the signs. Public Works will
That would be
meet that.
their cost and delay.
Again, ideally, yes. I think that they would like to transfer this to the town.
All right, what's your pleasure? Steve, where are you on this?
Yeah, I think when it's an appropriate time, if the workload, later in the season or in the fall, I think is when they're a little easier. Is it an immediate request?
No, there's just not, it's not time dependent. And I know where you are.
Well, I'm wondering, could we suggest to the Wild and Scenic River folks, the Suasco Basin Committee, that they, do the inspection for the signs periodically, so that we're not doing that? Or paying for any replacement signs? It seems to me reasonable that they're promoting and putting the signs up for recognition of the work of getting this designation, that they also have identified the locations where the signs should be, that they could also inspect the integrity of the signs on a periodic basis. And if they need replacing,
That'd be their
it'd
responsibility.
be their
We
responsibility.
would again install them, but they would have to call.
To me, that seems reasonable.
That's
Yeah.
a reasonable.
When it comes to digging, putting fence posts in or signposts on our land, I would assume that we know better how to locate and position those signs than
Okay.
another organization, but
All right, then, I'll kind of lay out the bullet points, and Steve, if you can put these bullet points into
Okay.
some motion sounding kind of thing. We'd approve the installation of these signs as described in their letter to the chair. that the signs will be installed by the Department of Public Works at their schedule. And any routine maintenance or replacements of the sign, including inspection, will be the responsibility of the applicant. Is that
That seems
more or
reasonable.
less reasonable?
And will that be palatable with our
Yeah.
CPW? Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Steve, you think you can,
Okay, let me give it a try here. I move to support the request for the town's assistance with the installation of river crossing signage as proposed in the letter dated July 22nd. Installation by the Department of Public Works shall be scheduled at a time favorable to the department. And the Sudbury, Assabet, and Concord Wild and Scenic River Stewardship Council shall be responsible for periodic inspection and replacement of any damaged signs.
Mr. Chair, could I just suggest that be sure to say you're granting approval of the location for the signs,
Yeah, I
because
think
you are
that's-
locating
yeah.
in the public right
I
of way.
think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, so I move to grant approval for location,
installation,
and location of signs with the town's I'm messing this all up here.
I think
Can we
conformance
piece that
with the
together?
request with the installation to be at the Public Works Department's first
Discretion.
available opportunity. or
The
something.
location is spelled out in the July
Right.
22nd,
master.
2016
So it's referenced in the
letter,
letter.
so.
all right,
We're good.
well, I think we're good. We get a second, we're good.
I'll second that.
5 o'clock meetings.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ms. Flood. Next item is the Minuteman Vocational Technical School discussion on public awareness. I'll tee up the issue, and then I'll ask Ms. Flood to identify herself and help us through this discussion. As you know, the towns were asked to vote on an appropriation for a new vocational school. All of the towns approved it except the town of Belmont, which meant that it failed. Subsequently, a district-wide vote was called. That election is scheduled September the 20th at our single voting place, Harvey Wheeler, from 12 o'clock noon until 8 p.m. The same appropriation is being voted on that was approved at town meeting. And so the question that we've talked about before, and I contacted Ms. Flood, is to come talk to us about it, make sure we understand the facts, so that the board can likely draft some kind of letter in addition to our discussion this evening that would go in the Concord Journal, making sure we've done our part to help get folks out to vote however they so choose to vote on this issue. So thank you for coming, Carrie.
Okay, yes, Carrie Flood, Concord's representative and vice chair of the Minuteman School Committee. I will start by saying I'm sorry that we have to go through this step. And even after Belmont's negative vote, we first considered the option of asking them to have a special town meeting. If the school committee had again voted to issue the debt, it would have put the onus on the town of Belmont to, within a certain number of days, hold a special town meeting if they wanted to, again, reject it. And in some respects, that seemed more fair, since then the burden of cost would be on the town that was forcing the reconsideration. What we heard from town officials there, which was a unanimous opinion of their Board of Selectmen, and a majority, narrow majority of their warrant committee, which is like our finance committee, that they would not change their recommendation, and they have a representative, not open town meeting, and that it was their expectation that if they had another town meeting, that the result would be the same. And where would that leave us? So with that in mind, the school committee voted to move into the ballot election, which is also allowed under state law. We could have actually gone there first, but we really valued the public education, no pun intended there, the community education on the project, going through all of the town meeting process. So here we are, a year later, back asking the voters to do what we considered asking them to do last September. In the meantime, the building conditions certainly have not improved. The fact that the building is on, the condition of the building has several components which don't meet current code. The school is on warning status for its accreditation solely because of the condition of the building. It's oversized, very inefficient to operate, not laid out in a way that is conducive with our current or envisioned educational plan. There's just a lot of things that it is, in the eyes of the school committee, the building committee, the advisory committee, everybody who is close to the situation, this is a critical moment in the history of Minuteman. And we prefer not to think about what would happen if the election fails, because we would have nowhere to go except to try to do it piecemeal. It would be less expensive. It would not have the support of the MSBA. It would be on the backs of the remaining member towns to totally fund that piecemeal renovation over a period of several years. It would, in my opinion, further erode confidence in the governance of the school, and certainly, parents' view of whether they support their child's choice to go to Minuteman with that kind of disruption over the course of several years just is not a good picture. So here we are. As a member of the school committee, I am limited in spending money, but I can say what I want. The political finance laws don't tape my mouth shut. And when I was appointed by Concord to be the Minuteman representative, it wasn't something I looked for. It was something I was asked to do. But I have, over the course of those 5 years, become a very strong supporter of its educational model and of its service to all of its member communities as an option for all of our students, should that turn out to be the better choice for them. So, given that, I have signed on as a member of a ballot initiative committee that is working on it. We will be, doing letter writing and possibly some limited mailing. We have a website, Facebook page at this point, and we will have a website. If there are people out there listening in TV land that are interested in helping with that effort, my contact information is on the Minuteman website under the school committee contact list. My phone number and my email address are there. So that is me as a member of the ballot initiative committee that you can contact. It's not a Minuteman address. Find me there. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them, but that sort of sets the stage.
Before we start the questions, I would like to invite Linda Miller, who is the chair of the town's finance committee, to join us here. The finance committee doesn't have a regularly scheduled meeting between now and when the ballot question comes up, so I thought making sure we had a chance for the chair to be involved in this discussion would be a good thing for everybody.
Neither actually does the Minuteman School Committee have a meeting scheduled until the 27th, so 1 week after the election.
So thank you very much for coming, Linda. Questions? So I have one that I think can just tee up. The town voted to approve this. The appropriation is not changed. It's the same appropriation. Subsequent to the town meeting, we voted at the ballot box to exclude it as debt, just for general information. If in fact this passes, that debt exclusion vote will hold and the debt will be excluded, so there's no need for us to go back to the ballot again.
That is the answer that we received from the attorneys.
Right.
Um,
So I guess the
School committee
question
had
I
on
want
there.
to start off with is what has changed between the time the town voted it last April and now that we should make the citizens aware of, if anything?
Well, it primarily is the fact that Belmont voted no. Know how their voters will vote in an open election. Because it was a representative town meeting, there were only 200 people there, and Belmont is a much larger community than that. So we'll be very curious to see what happens with the Belmont vote. Under the new agreement, if the question passes, because it's the aggregate vote of those who go to the polls from all 16 current members,
Simple majority.
simple majority, Belmont would then, if their own voters, if you look just at their piece, if they reject it, they would have the option to withdraw from the district. But that vote would be 2/3 of their town meeting. They did not have 2/3 vote rejecting the project. So that's, any thoughts we might make about that, purely
What's the
speculation at this point.
consequence if they would withdraw?
If they withdraw, they could continue sending students to Minuteman. They would pay tuition as an out-of-district community, and with an MSB-supported program, project, they would be assessed under the new regulations a share of the capital cost, which would be calculated in a manner similar to the assessment if they remain a member.
And that was in place when we voted in April, right? Because
Yes.
there were towns that had voted to exit the district that were indicated that they would continue to send, and there was a calculation of something like $8,000 per student, something like that per year.
Yep.
So that's if they decide to be out of the district, but
But
continue
continue
to
sending students.
send children. And
If
what other option do they have?
if they had voted, and if a majority of Belmont voters voting at the election vote no, and their town meeting votes to withdraw, and nobody stops it, they can leave, and they can seek to send their children to another school if they can find seats for them. It does not relieve the town of Belmont of their obligation under state law to provide access to vocational education. But the number of seats in other places are limited. Now, finally, I think the one that you're really looking for is if the other remaining members of the district block their exit, then and only then they can, they remain in the district but do not have to pay a share of the debt. But that is very
Lots of
remote and
ifs.
several steps
And if they
away.
weren't to pay their share of the debt, Concord's share would go up.
Would go up. The share, everybody else's share would go up incrementally.
So that's one change, and there's a bunch of ifs, so I don't want to make more of it than it is. But it's if the vote passes, but if Belmont votes no, and if their representative town government votes to exit, and they're not allowed to exit, then,
Right.
so a lot of ifs.
Several ifs and thens.
But nevertheless, the consequence of that set of ifs, in an adverse sort of way, was all of the remaining towns would bear the capital burden.
Now, the other thing that you mentioned when we were talking a few days ago, Michael, was newspaper coverage that the town of Sudbury had decided it was going to join the Assabet Valley
Right.
District. I will tell you, having spoken with the superintendent of the Assabet Valley Technical High School, who is the former principal of Minuteman, nobody was more surprised to read that in the paper than he was. That was the first he knew. And it was not a vote of the town of Sudbury, not a vote of the town select board or school committee. It was a recommendation of an advisory committee. Assabet Valley Tech has a regional agreement, very much like Minuteman's. The admission of a new town to a school which is now full would require a vote of all of the town meetings of the existing members, plus, of course, Sudbury's town meeting. So again, that is something that is several steps away. In the short term, their students, anybody who's currently enrolled, Minuteman is obligated to continue to educate them, and they will pay, you know, the way we've just described.
That's the other thing that's changed, and again, it's a string of ifs, but I think better to lay them out than not to have said them. Do we know anything more about how likely or how near to fact the payment in lieu of capital costs is in terms of its?
All we know is that every time we have asked DESI officials about that, is they have said that is the regulation and we will enforce the regulation.
But they haven't. So nothing really has
Until-
changed since town meeting? then,
No,
'cause
because we don't have an
Yeah.
approved project for them to respond on. It is very clear, however, if we do not have a project, that regulation is
Yeah,
not
sure.
in place
Yeah.
because the regulation applies only when there is an MSBA-supported
Building project.
building project.
Any additional questions?
I have a couple,
Sure,
if that's
please.
okay. So if, this is part of that what if. So if Sudbury is not accepted into the new district after that very long process of being accepted, they still have the option of sending out their students out of district to any of the schools, including Minuteman.
Yes,
Okay.
on a space available basis after all of the member communities are there. And in talking with the superintendent at Assabet, which was the choice of the advisory committee in Sudbury, they are essentially full. They have just completed their own renovation project, smaller scale, only about $30 million. So that fee is about to be assessed onto new members, or would be assessed onto new members. But the school committee of Assabet has not been looking for new members. And they, very much like Minuteman, have a significant number of students that are already attending on an out-of-district basis and have had for many years, much the way that Minuteman has a large number of students coming from Waltham and Medford and
Right.
places such as that. So is there a sense of loyalty to the schools, to the systems that have been sending schools for a long time? You know, it's an application process, it's a policy question that has not been asked of that school committee yet.
Assuming that the vote goes forward, yes, and gets built, we're talking about kind of a state-of-the-art that presumably people in the community are going to want to send people to, so we're not going to have problems filling it. And we're probably not going to have problems getting the payments necessary to pay whatever the debt, I would assume. So, and I think that needs to be said. You can always look at a liability that's involved with this, but you're also getting an enormous asset, so.
And we already know that applications were up 25 or 30% this year, even though the students entering as freshmen
Would never
next year,
sees it.
if they're lucky, we'll will be in the new building in their senior year. And I think that's partly because we've already started taking steps on a revised educational plan, which can only be partly realized in the existing building.
Question?
So I was curious about the activities of this other committee that is working on getting information out to potential voters. This is a committee of citizens who are interested in, is it a position to support Minuteman? And tell me what the activities are included, because, you know, you want, obviously, this board has been supportive all along of Minuteman. I think Concord has always been a strong supporter of Minuteman, oftentimes voting at town meeting with very little controversy over each budget.
Okay, we've only had one meeting so far. That was last Thursday night. It took place in Acton. We had, there were probably, I want to say, half dozen, maybe 8 members of the school committee there with their other hat on. But that's out of about 30 people total. So there were a couple of staff members from Minuteman who are allowed to do this on their own time, not during working hours and not spending any of the resources of the school. There were several. There were members of some of the other committees in our member communities who, like you, strongly supported the project to their own town meetings that voted. So there is some energy out there, but we have only a very short while to do this. And we're not going to be doing the kind of fundraising that would allow, for instance, any fancy brochures to be mailed to the 100,000 or so residents of all of these communities. We might do some targeted mailing. We're going to try to get on to our local cable stations. There are already a couple of good programs that have been taped before. The school website, Minuteman's website, under the building project has quite a bit of information already there. Because until this became a ballot initiative, they were not restricted in being able to do that as long as it was the town meeting. So there's a great deal of information online, and I am actually going to be, I'm leaving tomorrow morning on a camping trip, but I will have access to email. Cell phones, even at a campground in the mountains, are going to work. So,
Additional question?
I think that's,
Just a majority rule, straight up total vote,
It
yes
is.
or no. So, I mean, I think that's probably your biggest challenge is even Concord supporting it all these years faithfully. It's getting those folks into that ballot.
if you
putting
support
some in
it,
the
please
ballot.
come. Please vote. And the election itself is different. It is defined in state law. You only need to have one polling place per town, and Concord has chosen the Harvey Wheeler building. And the law states that the polls will only be open for 8 hours, not more than 8 hours. So there was and it has to be the same in all towns. And I will say, Anita, our town clerk, was extremely helpful in organizing a meeting of the town clerks from all 16 communities. She provided some initial information about, this is not something regional school districts do very often, and Minuteman had never done. So she became a valuable resource in terms of providing information on how something might be done. What would be the questions that town clerks in the other communities would be asking so that we could do the research, talk to the attorneys, talk to the state officers. And then a meeting was held a couple of weeks ago with with town clerks from all 16 communities so that everybody's on board and knows what and why.
And what were the hours again?
I think it's
12 to
noon
8.
to
12 to
8.
8.
12 to 8, yeah.
And I think when Anita was here, we did discuss the absentee ballot, because that's not going to be convenient for everybody, a fairly narrow period of time. And I think she said that there would be absentee ballots to 3 weeks ahead of time or
Yep.
something like that.
Right.
So that's the other aspect that probably needs to.
So there's a very clear list that has been drawn up of things that the Minuteman administration will do on a bulk basis across all 16 towns, and having the ballots printed and the voting machines programmed,
Right.
that kind of stuff, and a postcard that goes out to inform people of the election, which will be an all-resident postcard. It cannot take a position. It will simply state the date, the time, and the question, and here's where you can find more about it.
The additional,
Each individual community will be responsible for paying the election officers and the police detail and that sort of stuff, but those bills can be submitted
reimbursed.
for reimbursement.
Okay.
Do you have other questions? Linda, do you have a question?
I have a couple of
Please.
questions, and just for clarification, because I'm not nearly as informed as the select board is, but when our citizens go to vote on the 20th of September, they will be faced with a question about supporting the new building at Minuteman. That same question will be facing all 16 towns.
Exactly the same wording in all
So it's the
16
same
towns.
wording, it's the same vote, and but we're not voting as a town. We are voting as individuals, in part of the district. So it's not as if 3 people went to the polls, Concord's vote would be registered as one of 16.
No.
So the more people from Concord who go,
Excellent point.
the greater our weight will be. So that's one question I have. And then the other question about what Belmont could do or might not do, are they actually voting on that? Or is that all sort of speculative? Is that?
They can't take any action until the vote passes and it's been affirmed that their town voted no. So they can't, there's nothing they can do.
At this point, it's
It's what if.
speculative, and any town could, in the future, decide to do different things with their role at Minuteman. So it's not necessarily going to happen on the 20th that all of these issues will be voted or not. So this is really a vote to support Minuteman, and the greater voice, if the greater our turnout is, the greater voice Concord will have. And then the second question I have is, from a finance committee point of view, we have 17 students or so that
Right
went to
now, and
Minuteman.
increasing. Historically, we've had in the low to mid-20s. It dropped precipitously back several years ago and has been climbing again.
But relative to our 1,250 students at Concord Carlisle, or I shouldn't speak for Concord, so we're 70.
For Carlisle, you can speak for Concord, but
73%,
not
I can
for
speak
Carlisle,
for
yeah.
Concord, but for our 70% of the 1,250,
Right.
the number of students going to Minuteman is a small number, but very important. And it's important that they have a choice. But financially, the amount of money that we annually support Minuteman with, given that we do have a small population there, is not relative to our budget a significant item. Is that, given?
I can never imagine us being, a large piece of the overall Minuteman budget. Therefore, I would imagine it would remain a relatively small piece of Concord's educational budget. And you
It's
talk about
around
it.
$400 and some odd thousand is
That's-
what it
yeah.
was.
Right. So this is important. It's important to a very small but valued
Critically important
constituency.
to a relatively small group of
And
students.
very important to an option that everyone who goes through our educational system has.
And an important asset to area employers in terms of a trained, qualified workforce that comes with hands-on experience. There's a lot of, work-study stuff going on. There are partnerships in the works now with colleges so that in a few years, in a new building, we think that kids can graduate from Minuteman with an associate's degree. It's probably a 5-year, not a 4-year. But there's a lot of, just so much is possible in a new building that we can't do in the current one. And, even if the kids we send there aren't among the 65% that go on to a 4-year college afterwards for Minuteman, we still need electricians, we still need plumbers, we still need carpenters. And even though we have become more and more a service economy,
Yeah,
we
other
need
questions?
people in those professions.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank
I
you
would
very
just
much.
say that the ballot question is the same as you was indicated, as was the warrant article at town meeting was the same across all. Belmont's option to vote to get out of the district, and if it does, or doesn't rather, not bearing capital costs though, is a condition of the district agreement that follows a district-wide vote. So it's any town could vote, I suppose, at any time to leave the district. But the difference here is this action, if Belmont would take it, if, would mean they would escape any responsibility for the capital costs. So,
And that actually was included in the revised regional agreement as a way of practically ensuring that a town that wanted to get out could get out. Because who would let them out, who would make them stay if they were going to stay with, with a reduced ticket price. So,
Other questions? Okay.
So I have one small question.
Sure.
Do you happen to know if there's an opposition group active in Belmont that's?
I have not heard of one, but, I haven't Googled that.
Yeah, I'm just curious, So it seems like it's to all the town's benefit to maximize the number of citizens who come to the polls on September 20th, no matter what their position is. The outcome of any election really depends on voting citizens. And it would be critical for us to be able to work on making sure people know that these are important
I
issues.
think when we talked, we briefly had this conversation last time we met, which precipitated inviting you to come to us. But where we were, I think, last time, and I would certainly still support it, is if there was a motion authorizing the chair or somebody to draft a letter to the Concord Journal, I think rather than advocacy, I think our responsibility is to point out that that this is up, where it is, when it is, that kind of stuff, and that we supported it last time, and the Finance Committee supported it last time. The town voted approval at the town meeting and subsequently voted to exclude the debt. I was like, I think some of these things we talked about tonight, given the constraints of the Concord Journal, is very hard for us to ram it into 250 or whatever number of words. So I think a strong article that says, go vote, this is important. We've dealt with this before. So I would be happily entertain a motion to authorize somebody on the committee to generate that.
I'd be happy to make that motion if we're ready for it.
Who are you going to authorize?
Well, I'm going to author.
I'm happy to if you would do that.
Does this need further discussion before I make this motion? I hear a proposal on the table. Steve, are you okay
I
with
think
this?
we're all.
Okay, so
Do you have any objection?
I would move to authorize the chair to prepare and sign a letter or a document to the Concord Journal stating the town's historical approach of approval of the budgets and intent of the Minutemen Vocational Technical School.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you,
And
Linda.
one last time, my contact information is on the school committee page of the Minuteman website. If there are people out there who would like to sign on, perhaps attend the next meeting of our ballot initiative committee, it will be in Acton next Thursday night. And I'd be happy to get anybody information about that.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Gary.
Next item on our agenda is the letter of support for the neonicotinoid legislation. As I think I wrote to you indicating that I had visited Senator Barrett's office when I was at the Municipal Modernization Act signing, finding out about this because we had heard it was stuck in the Ways and Means Committee, and in fact, that's the truth. But they said that if we were supportive of this, they would encourage us to continue with this letter, but that we would just add language that says, we hope you take it up again. And that was your charge, and we've got the letter. And
So I did draft a letter addressing it to Representative Carol Dykema, who I think it's misspelled in this version. I think I typed it wrong. Dykema with an M. Thank you.
Come on.
Urging her to refile the legislation that it had support of Concord and Concord's beekeepers, and that we see a need to protect the pollinators, critical to a lot of our agricultural needs as well as the livelihood of our beekeepers. So that letter is in the packet. I'm sorry, I don't know that you have much time to review it. An earlier draft had been sent, and this is now a revised, given the timing. So we'd be urging the legislature to refile the legislation and to follow it through in this next term. A copy would go to our own representatives, Corey Atkins and Mike Barrett.
I move to authorize the chair to sign and transmit letter as drafted to the Massachusetts legislation.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much, and thanks for your continued effort on this.
I have to acknowledge my partner here, Mark Hanson, who has helped me to understand The
Thanks for
risk
coming.
of neonicotinoids to pollinator communities, not just bees.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, Chris, are you going to take the lead here on this? Is the CPA projects?
Yeah, and the Community Preservation Committee is soliciting applications for CPA funding for the fall that would be decided by November, I think, to be placed on the warrant in January and acted upon by the April town meeting. So the board has historically opined, asked the staff to prepare a list of potential projects to fund, and the board usually opines on which you believe to be priorities for the community. So Marcia has drafted a list for your consideration.
And not only would we like to discuss this tonight, but you would really like our priorities tonight because of the deadline for filing applications. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay.
And a fair amount of work goes into it,
Yep.
so that's why I asked for it, because if you next meet on September 12th, and that wouldn't allow much time to prepare the
Much time to get the
application.
job done. Might I ask you to let us know your thinking on this list of priorities?
Uh,
All right.
The,
fine.
First question, I guess, Chris, is the list in an order of priority, or there's just a list?
No, I think it's just a list.
Just a list.
Some are requests for funding are continuation of things that were started, like the Harrington House is a continuation, and other things are sort of standalone projects.
So what is your opinion about how you'd like to go through this list? Is it one at a time? Would that be efficient for us?
I'm not exactly sure. There are 9 of them. I would say a number of them are land acquisition kind of activities. Emerson Farmland, Giroux Family Realty Trust adjacent to Warner's Pond, Simone Farm, the community garden and habitat protection area. So a number of them are those. So
Yes. So if you want to talk a little bit about the land
why don't we-
opportunities, let me mention the Ruth Giroux passed away earlier this summer, so it's a relatively new thing to talk about. But there are about 7 acres of land between the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail and Warner's Pond, frontage on the pond. There's a home and some land that I think the planning board had decided there was insufficient frontage for any further development. So it's a single house lot with 7 acres on it. And I think Marcia Rasmussen, the planning director, feels it would be a very good opportunity to consider recreational, perhaps combined with affordable housing. But the CPC has supported dredging, a partial dredging of Warner's Pond to try to get the pond healthy again and maybe usable for swimming or boating. The rail trail's going right by there. Could be an opportunity to really enhance some recreational opportunities for folks, perhaps in combination with some affordable housing. So that's a relatively new addition to the list. The Emerson land you've heard about, we did put that in after the Balls Hill Road. There's also an effort or an interest there by the Emerson folks to use the funds to preserve, to create an endowment by selling the land to the town, create an endowment that would protect their property. But then they also hope to see some affordable housing on that property.
is there affordable housing right adjacent to it?
There's public housing. The
Public housing.
Housing Authority has some family housing, I think 3 duplexes, 6 units. So it was suggested that maybe the existing Housing Authority land could be more intensively developed with another 1 or 2 units, and that opportunity to preserve the farm field might be an opportunity there. So I think it needs some further discussion now that the Balls Hill Road land seems to be moving towards a town, towards conclusion, hopefully in December, if all goes well with the fundraising. And then the Shimoni land is something that's been, on the books for a while. The family did sell, I think it was 8 acres for 8 house lots, so that a substantial development, and I think there's a conservation restriction on the remaining land, so it shouldn't be top market value for developable land. So the question is, does the board wish to acquire the property and perhaps the house for affordable housing and, or farmer housing and land preservation? So I think we need some guidance from the board on which of these land acquisitions are priorities for you. I mentioned that the Harrington master plan, I think, makes some sense. We've owned the property since 1975. It's a historic home that sits on 11 acres, and it's been kept up, but not really the way perhaps it should be. So they're looking at whether that might be a good location for the Balls Hill Road barn or house. So they're doing some continued study and planning for that property. Makes sense to me. Item number 5 is the trail development, open space and recreation for easements along the Assabet River. That's an interest to try to develop some foot trails along the Assabet River to have trail network in the heart of West Concord Village that would provide access to the river. There's apparently some indication of a willingness to sell trail easements to the town. Habitat protection, open space, that's a substantial amount of money that's there requested for acquisition for a neighborhood park. She didn't specify, Marcia didn't specify a particular parcel. The Regional Housing Services Office, I hope we continue to use the seat. It seems like a good use of CPA funds is to continue that. Junction Village Assisted Living is there, and that I know is on the board's agenda for discussion. So what you don't see is Sleepy Hollow Public Works.
I just wrote that
I
down.
think Rich felt that given all the work, he was not in a position to prepare an application. It's a time-consuming effort to prepare the application, so I think he's going to put that on hold to a future round.
Okay.
Well, I'll start off. It just seems to me that we'd be, disingenuous if that Junction Village item wasn't pretty high on the old hit parade here. I mean, we've talked about that an awful lot, and made a lot of representations of our support.
And I don't know if you would consider a multi-year support. I think it sounded like the Community Preservation Committee was hoping that the $1 million or the contribution could be spread out over a period of time.
Yes, they indicated to me, I think 3 years would be something that they would, so I think it would be wise to double check with the chair, before we submit it, but I think that would.
And check with the Junction Village folks to find out whether that meets their time frame. They might only have 2 years.
We did we did raise that issue. I'm confident we raised that issue with Grantham when he was here one evening, specifically because I had met with the incoming chair of CPC, and she had indicated we were thinking 2, and she kind of said, I don't think so, right? So I'm pretty sure we double checked with him on that.
I recall that conversation, so.
Yeah.
I think that would be my number 1 choice of projects to put forward. The Regional Housing Services Committee, Services Office would be another.
Yeah.
My personal interest, and I don't know if any other board members would agree, is the continued work with the Harrington Park Master Plan. And we've done quite a bit of work on that property. We've also made a commitment to look for good locations for the Ball Benson Farm and perhaps the house, and there's enough property there for us at least to review whether it's possible to erect that on the property.
I totally agree with that.
That would be an appropriate study to be conducted to finalize the master plan for the Bliller Harrington House.
Yeah.
Those would be my top 3.
Yeah, we'd indicated we'd take some action with respect to the Ball Benson barn, and so I think this is appropriate to live up to that commitment that we made.
Is there enough room on the Giroux site for the barn?
I believe it's 7 acres. I don't know.
That's an interesting idea.
Kind of, presumably, it wouldn't be a building lot or a house lot, because I know there was some decision on that said it had limited development potential. But I think to put the house on an existing lot or the historic structure, I think that could have some potential.
And it's just kind of
And, near the-
multiple amenities in this one parcel.
Near the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, we'll get a lot of
Yeah.
traffic for an interpretive
Interesting idea.
historical thing.
Well, I'd have that be number 3 on my hit parade. So right after the Junction Village, the Harrington property, and then the,
The Giraffe.
yeah. Are there any kinds of plan, I mean, is there any kind of plan or anything laid out for the Emerson farmland?
No, I don't,
Yeah, I
we
get
haven't,
it's a good
we
idea.
haven't gotten that far along.
That's the one, the trail from the forest comes out right in the back.
That's right.
Is that right? So what I hear are those 3 land acquisitions and the support for the regional housing service.
Wheeler Harrington is not a land acquisition. Which of the 3 that you're looking at is land? Zero.
The Junction Village, number
Yes.
1, and then the 2 land acquisitions.
Which
that
2?
we-
You're talking Giroux?
Harrington,
Harrington is not a land acquisition. We
okay,
already own that. So that's a master plan and possible
Right, sorry.
development for the Bob Ensign Barn.
yeah.
So Giroux would be a land acquisition,
Mhm.
perhaps Shimoni property for community housing or continued agriculture, some use of the property. That, I can't recall, that property backs up to other conservation land, right?
Yeah,
It's part of it does now, so it's.
It's close to the National Wildlife.
Simone-
Right,
the Simone line?
Yeah,
Yeah,
So it
back, at
creates
least
a
backs up to
corridor.
that trail, doesn't
Yeah.
it? I mean,
Yep, on the
abandoned rail
railroad.
trail.
which is one of the decision-making tools that we look at, throughout town is its nexus to other properties to create a wildlife corridor, or an open space corridor that's connected. That's one of the natural resources metrics for deciding on properties to invest in.
So item 8, item 1, item 3,
And 7,
then item 7. I mean, I
and they're
think,
all great, but.
yeah, the land acquisition at Emerson Farm, I mean, if we could have a plan of some kind around, I mean, that's a terrific piece of land up against the forest.
And I'm sorry, which property?
The Emerson farmland on Walden Street. My only reservation about it is it's a pretty good sized parcel of land, and it would be nice if there was like a plan for it as opposed to let's grab it.
We don't have a value on the, or cost on the trail development along the Assabet River. And if that was a low-cost item, it seems to me that is an awfully, being a nice aspect to that.
Where is 36A Baker Ave? Which side of Route 2 is that?
I believe that is the property adjacent to, was formerly Citizens Bank, or across from the new Citizens Bank, near Dino's Pizza,
Yeah,
right?
okay.
How did we
Is
acquire?
that the
We
land they
acquired it-
gave us
Yeah,
a few
it was
years
given-
ago?
Right, the bank used,
So it's a-
created some parking, and then the,
We got this little piece of land with a
Right.
boat ramp, I think.
right.
And it's a parcel that's contiguous to that, or?
I think it's about an acre of land, I think, and it's
But right behind the bank.
right behind the bank.
I remember this.
Yep,
But wait, so I thought we already were given that property.
So this, yeah,
This is improving it.
Oh, this
This
is
is
improving it.
exactly why, this
Ah,
is exactly why I was opposed to this at the time.
a gift
Might have to
is, whether
spend
a
some
gift
money.
is a gift, if
It
I
was
recall
a
the
piece of property
conversation.
that had absolutely no value to the bank whatsoever because they couldn't do a thing with it, so they gave it to us. And now we're gonna turn around and spend $100,000 on it. I mean, it just,
Maybe the bank would like
Saw
to
that
invest
coming.
in the development of property there.
we should ask the bank to,
So if that's the case,
We could put a couple of condos
it's
there.
not high on my list until we figure it out.
Again, it's in the center of West Concord Village,
Yeah.
some open space that right now you can't really access. It's kind of overgrown, so I think the hope is that it could be opened up and be a cool resting place near the river for people. Okay, so, and again, you've been surprised in the past when something doesn't make your top 5 list, and yet the application gets submitted anyway. So
Yeah.
I think that some of these Marcia feels would be worth some time to spend on the application to give the CPC a broader range of choices,
Maybe,
so.
maybe it would be helpful if you came, after sharing our views with the folks,
Back
if you
with some more
came back on the
information.
12th with, here's what we're intending to do, or we've begun doing, so if there's something there that we think is just
Okay,
out of nowhere, we could perhaps deal with that. Give you enough?
yeah. it
So
does.
1, 3, 7, and 8 would be the priorities of the hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you very much.
Gentlemen, sorry to keep you waiting. So the next item on the agenda is discussing the feasibility of a potential special town meeting. So I guess I'll tee it up. We've been approached by a citizen to hold a special town meeting that would allow for the approval of certain warrant articles to do with zoning changes that would then facilitate a development. So, Mr. McBride, if you would just identify yourself for the.
Yeah, Jack
folks.
McBride.
We have your
developer.
letter, so if you'd
You
like
do.
to walk us
Yeah.
through this.
Yeah, I think it's important to clarify too that we're not requesting a special town meeting. We were approaching you to discuss the possibility of it. And we're very sensitive to the fact that it's a lot of work for everybody to hold the town meeting. And the question is really, in this case, if there is a fall town meeting, to give you an update on our proposal with regard to Black Birch. So I'll do that very quickly, talk about Black Birch. I think most of you probably recall was approved at 2015 town meeting as an alternative PRD, 25 homes, age restricted, people 55 and older for sale community. First one in Concord of the type. And it was approved just about unanimously at town meeting with recommendations from the your board, the planning board, and the FinCom. And at this point, so that's in the spring of 2015, right now we have 18 homes under construction or completed. Sales demand's been very strong, combination of Concord people moving to Concord to be near their children and grandchildren, people from Acton and the surrounding communities looking to move out of the existing home and get into something maintenance-free and smaller. And 2/3 of the homes are sold. And we have 3 affordable units, and the lottery, I think we picked up 6 qualified buyers. So the first buyer will be closing in August, Concord resident, and the other 2 are going to be constructed shortly, so they'll be delivered along the way. So we started looking early in the summer at the idea of maybe a phase 2 for Black Birch, and we talked with the Thoreau Club and identified a parcel that if you go to the Thoreau Club, when you get to that final circle to the right, there's a field abutting the Muse and the Concord Light Plant. And so we started looking at that and brought the planner who did the original Black Birch site plan in and developed a plan and met with the planning staff and talked about really kind of replicating the same benefits to the town that we had the first time, which were that type of housing. They averaged about 300 square feet, so smaller than what's being built on average, new housing. Open space donation to the town, energy efficient housing. We've been hitting anywhere between 48 and 57 on a HERS rating, so we're doing very well with energy efficiency. And then repeating the fiscal benefit to the town that the initial study showed was pretty dramatic because there were no kids going to school, but you had the tax revenue. And we've updated that to using the John Connery methodology to about 320,000 net positive per year for phase one. And when we add in a potential phase two, it's over 500,000 net positive revenue to the town. So as we talked about that, we also talked about the affordable housing component, and the discussion came up, given the needs of the town in a number of projects, affordable housing, and given the relatively high subsidy per unit here, whether we could come up with a proposal to do an alternative cash donation to affordable housing or affordable on-site, and just show the numbers and talk with various people, stakeholders about the two. So we were able to do that and came up with a proposal of $1 million cash donation or the two affordable. The two affordable on 16 was same ratio that we had in phase one that was approved by town meeting, which was 3 and 25. And basically how we came up with the number was in phase one, the affordables averaged $350,000 per unit, which was Concord affordable. They range from 120 to 140% of median. Concord affordable goes up to 150. And the subsidy relative to market sales, we calculated approximately $500,000 per unit. That's how we came up with that number. So as we looked at that and ran our numbers going forward and did the alternative analysis, we came to the conclusion that if we could get, and at the time, this is a couple months ago, there has been discussion about special town meeting in the fall. So that's sort of where we didn't make it up. We were working off of that idea that might happen. We said if we could get the town meeting approval this year, we could, last time we got through the planning board and the zoning board for the PRD approval in about 90 days. If we could repeat that, we'd have the ability with our current schedule to keep our team in place on site. We have a model, we have a model and a marketing center. We've got full-time marketing staff, and we've got site contractors and all kinds of contractors. That there would be a tremendous advantage to keep the project going, and we'd be able to commit the funds basically up front, as opposed to just the building of the units, which it's a little different financially in the model, one or the other, even though the subsidy is the same. So that's where we started, and we had conversations with various folks about whether there would be a fall town meeting, whether there could be a fall town meeting, and that's what brought us to you. I also want to emphasize that we've spoken with a couple members of the Housing Foundation. I think they're both here tonight, and we've talked to the Housing Development Corporation. And we're not presupposing that one alternative is necessarily better than the other. And I think there's been mixed opinion about what, if you start to take, I've heard the sort of expression, if you start to take all the units and not do them on site and donate money, is that something you want to do? Or other people say if you're putting $500,000 per unit into a unit that doesn't count, is that the right thing to do? So I think we're not looking to get into really the discussion of the pros and cons here, but we would expect that would be a significant process of vetting the alternative should we be able to get to a fall town meeting, and that at town meeting one of the two would be approved by the town, the way I envision it. That's all. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
We don't currently have an agenda that we were looking for a special town meeting for, is that correct? We have nothing that we would need to be moving for a special town meeting?
No.
But if we were to agree that a special town meeting is appropriate and that we'd be willing to do that, the period of time from the time we open the warrant, anyone can come forward with a small number of signatures and put an article on a special town meeting warrant.
It's 100 signatures for a
100.
special town meeting as opposed to the 10 for annual town meeting to
Okay.
put in an article.
But yes.
But yeah, so any interested party
And
would have
just
the
for-
ability
Just for
to,
completeness, if we would decide that, not to approve a special town meeting, 200 citizens could petition, and there would be a special town meeting. So both is for a town meeting, there's a citizen way to have it occur, and warrant articles in.
There is one town department that made a request that if you have a special town meeting, it would be the light plant's payment in lieu of tax arrangement with the Kearsarge Company for the W.R. Grace site, where they weren't in a position to that know exactly how many solar panels there would be and what the value would be, so they weren't in a position to negotiate a pilot, a payment in lieu of tax program. So if the light plant would move forward, if the board did, would ask the select board to consider adding that to a warrant if you have a special town meeting.
What's the approximate cost of a special town meeting? Any idea?
It's about $10,000. That's up. It had been $8,000 for a year, but cost has gone up a little bit. So
We're
it's
probably
another-
talking one night at the high school? Is that the?
Would depend. I suspect that if we went ahead with this, Mr. McBride has, I think, provided us with the actual kind of warrants that would be available. If those were the only articles on a special town, we could have it in here or over at Ripley or someplace, but you don't know. So if it got to be a number of warrant articles, you'd have to, be more attentive to the size. So if it was just here, it wouldn't be anywhere near $10,000.
If we do decide to schedule a special town meeting and officially open the warrant, we don't need to define where the venue is until the warrant's closed. Is that
Right. Yeah, we wouldn't have to do that until
some flexibility?
That's true.
late in October, yeah.
we would be advised to look for possible locations before the warrant closes, because we may have to look at double booking
Yeah, but
rooms
we
that
don't
are already
have
in
to
place.
officially
So you wouldn't have to name it.
and make that decision
Yeah.
until you start to see how many articles, how intense a warrant it can be.
Well, forgetting for a moment, forgetting the specific argument, been discussions with the town manager, with the clerk, with the acting clerk, with the finance director about if we decided to do this, how would it play out?
Right.
Right, and you have in your packet a set of, so if we went ahead and did it, we know when the town meeting would be. We would be then going to find venues to lock it up, so we could, not lock it up, but reserve it so that we could go ahead with that town meeting. Other questions for Fry?
I'm understanding that a special town meeting would allow you to proceed more quickly, with your crews would just stay on site and continue working if everything went the way it's being proposed. A special town meeting sometime this fall allows you to do the rest of the permitting process you think you probably need to do before you can build the second edition or the second parcel. So this is to smooth your transition from one phase to the next.
Right.
In addition to the crew staying on site, I heard you say that there would be an existing model from phase one that could be used as a model for phase two, so people would actually
Yeah.
have might make the marketing easier.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing in real estate is always time, risk. Risk is, market risk is definitely correlated with time. So the further you plan out, the more risk you can have market changes or things that happen in the world. So right now, it's really, we're in a position, fortunately, to be able to make that commitment and make that donation. I've been living in town 25 years and worked on affordable housing, and if that's what the town chooses to do, I'm really pleased that we're able to do it. But it really is, at this point, something that we can commit to with that kind of time window, and can't commit beyond that at this point. So that's the difference.
I actually see no reason not to try to accommodate and have the special town meeting. I mean, there's a very rational reason for it, and I'm not hearing any great reasons not to do it.
I agree. I think there's some benefit in what's being proposed as well for the town. And I think the project currently is doing very well, I think, and I support it.
Alice?
I have no objections to going forward with a special town meeting. I mean, I think that's the question. Do we have any objections to
Yeah.
going
Right,
forward
right.
with
I
a
think
special
I-
town
what I-
meeting?
Any downside?
What, well, the downside is it's a very busy fall. We have
Yeah,
the
2
Minuteman
elections.
election on the 20th, the primary on, I've forgotten the
8th.
date. A general election the 8th, the town clerk is away, so we have an acting town clerk. So it's a very busy time for the town, and these things might seem straightforward to us that go sit at a table
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
wave our colored ballots, but
Yeah.
there's a lot of,
And a presidential
Can the town
election.
support this?
Huh?
You know,
And a presidential.
and a presidential election.
so given the amount of activity in the fall, can the town support?
We did look at a mid-October or to late October timeframe, and that really would have been difficult for the town clerk staff to, because the presidential election, although it's on November 8th, there's a lot of, you can vote 10 days in advance now for the first time, and there's a lot of absentee ballots that are cast in Concord, more than I think the state average. So there's a lot of activity before the election. But a special town meeting after the election and after Thanksgivings in early December, would seem to work
Was
reasonably
doable?
well.
Yeah, so Steve, Chris, and I met with Mr. McBride and Mr. Hurley to talk about the details of this, and we had proposed a calendar. And then subsequent conversations that Chris had with the acting town clerk and the finance director led to this revised, I think. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the calendar that the finance department put together, originally we were looking at Monday, December 5th. And what's proposed here is Thursday, December
December
8th. And the reason for that is if it were Monday, a more traditional date for holding a special town meeting, the last day for registering would be the day after Thanksgiving. And actually, the town house is closed on that day, and it wouldn't have been a good choice. So that's the reason why you see Thursday being proposed.
Okay. And I just asked the question, has this been reviewed for not conflicting with Jewish holidays, or?
I believe so, yes. But we'll double check and make sure if the board is
I think this is,
favorable.
in fact, I hear no objections from the board, but this is an important decision, so I'd like to open it up if there's anybody in the audience who has a point of view about this. I wish you would come up. Jack, maybe I could ask you to go back so we have a microphone for whomever might want to speak. Was there somebody that wanted to? No. Terry, please.
Terry Rothermel, 330 Skiddaquid Road. Mr. McBride is one of my heroes in housing. He has engaged in a couple of projects that have helped diversity and housing and incorporated affordable housing in those projects. As is so popular these days, I'm not there yet on this one. One of the first principles I have for, like the town has for housing, is that we have mixed developments. That we use the opportunity of making money and building houses for regular market values and have that project subsidize within it a diversity and community that reflects Concord's so far housing values. I am not a fan of buying out. And the precedent of allowing developers or even suggesting developers that they buy out by providing what appears to be easy money for housing, but loses the value of inclusionary community and the new developments. I also have problems with the town government part of this. One thing, I think that if this is to be the only reason for calling a town meeting, that the development should be getting its own 200 signatures like any group of citizens. I hate to see one developer this year and other developers in following years take advantage of this vehicle to have special town meetings and make more sense of their commercial projects. I know that it was a surprise to Jack and a surprise to my housing colleagues who are here tonight that I am not a fan of this idea from both the housing point of view and the town government point of view. I think from a town government point of view, special town meetings are usually called for interest of the public and the government. And certainly articles in our town meetings have commercially supported articles. But I'm fearful of our stepping forward and applauding private interest projects for what they are doing that's good, but giving them the precedent of a special town meeting on the select board's behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry, appreciate it. Someone else wish to speak?
Barbara Morse, 1975 Main Street, representing Concord Housing Development Corporation. This was an intriguing proposal that Jack put forward. And Terry's one of my housing heroes, as he well knows. He's helped us in so many ways, and I'm sure will continue to help us. This is an unusual situation. My understanding is that there, in fact, was a previous circumstance under which a developer, Marcia might be able to help me, made a payment in lieu of putting units, not Minot Road.
Monson Road.
Munson Road. Some years back. It may not have required a special town meeting to do a zoning approval in order to make it work. And I know there's been a lot of discussion over the years about how do we find that workable solution in which we achieve the goals of affordable housing while also encouraging development of different sizes. And in fact, we had a ratio where if you were developing, and feel free to correct me, Marcia, developing 4 units, for example, you were still required to do 25% of those units as affordable, and what happened was nobody built them. So we've had to adjust that. And so to have some flexibility in how we go about both encouraging responsible development and yet at the same time achieving our goals of affordable housing, it isn't ever going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think the other thing to remember is that the 2 affordable units that would go into a development of the size that Jack is talking about at this point would be affordable at levels above which they would count on the housing inventory. They would be probably at 120, 140, 150% AMI. And while we, in fact, are looking at ways to increase what they're now referring to as workforce housing, so the sort of moderate rate housing needs, those do not count on our AMI. Should a donation become available to assist additional housing projects, Junction Village being the one that we talk the most about right now, that could potentially allow us to create 83 units as opposed to the 2, and all of those 83 units would count on the AMI and would put us in a position to sort of secure our over the 10% guideline that the state wants us to have for affordable housing. It's always a trade-off. Concord's done an amazing job of putting affordable housing in so many different places around the town. Most people don't know where it is, which is wonderful because it blends in wherever it is. I know even when we built Lally Woods, oh gosh, 8 years ago now, 7 years ago, in the end, we had, I believe, 3 units that could be counted on the AMI, and then there were a couple that were in the middle category, and that 2 at market rate that then helped to subsidize the others. And the amount of work and energy and effort that goes in to get you 3 or 5 or 6 units is frustrating sometimes. And we continue to talk about, all right, well, what do we do about all those little houses that we're losing in Concord? Is there a way to capture those? So we're constantly talking and thinking about all of the different ways to accommodate more affordable housing in the town. And I think we just have to recognize there's never any one solution. This is a really intriguing idea. Maybe we try it, and we decide it isn't the way that we want to go further down the line, that we're not going to, I realize precedents get set. Maybe we find it's one of several solutions on how developers can do their work, and at the same time, the town can benefit from that. We had a long discussion about this at the CHGC board meeting last week, and we didn't take a vote on it, but in general, the consensus was we didn't see downsides to it, either from the government side, and as Jack said, at the time, we thought there was going to be a special town meeting and they could kind of latch onto this, nor from the housing side. So without a formal vote, I would say that it's a proposal that we certainly would be willing to consider.
Thank you.
I had understood that our discussion of the special town meeting was whether it was appropriate or not. I don't think we endorsed the warrant.
No.
In any respect. So I'm not, I mean, I think the issue before us is whether we have the special town meeting, not whether the gifting is appropriate or not. I mean, I think that can be discussed as we go on, but it really has to do with.
Terry had made 2 points.
Yeah.
One was about, I think I would characterize it as being opposed to the idea.
Yeah.
And the second was being opposed to the selectmen calling a
Right.
special town meeting, that ought to be the burden of the
And I guess
applicant.
my point is, I think that the second point was
Germane.
addressing, right,
No,
what we were
I-
talking about, the first points, we really, that's not what we were sort of focusing on.
But I don't need to have Terry, but I think Terry would respond by saying, yes, but if you believe what the warrant, what the proposal is
Yeah.
not in the best interest of the town, you certainly shouldn't then be calling a special town meeting. I think put words in his mouth, but that'd be my guess. Anyone else who'd like to speak on the matter? Please. Police.
Charles Phillips, Chair of the Concord Housing Foundation.
Phillips.
This has come up very quickly, and you know, the foundation has not had a chance to weigh in on it. But my first question is, is the intent of the board to decide tonight whether to call the special town meeting?
Well, we certainly can. I don't know what we'll decide to do, but we certainly could. I've checked with Chris to find out if, could we postpone action until our next selectmen meeting, which is the 12th. But I think it would be only fair to the applicant here that we would indicate if we decided to postpone our action until the 12th. That would be predicated on trying to give people an opportunity, which I think you're expressing. But we could indicate that the board didn't see any opposition, is what I heard at least 3 of our folks say.
Okay.
Well, it's very difficult to disentangle the two parts of this. One is the merits of the applicant's request and the decision to hold the meeting. So I guess I really should say here that the town, I think something that you need to consider in the discussion when it comes to the merits of the proposal, that the planning board has been working very hard to try to get all multifamily developments into a situation where at least 10% of the units will be below market. And it is somewhat problematic to, because of the particular situation of the land in this particular development, to not agree to that same general desire of the town to actually include affordable housing in these various developments. So I guess that's really all I wanted to say. It's something that we need to think about.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
In the effort to be
And you
brief,
are?
my name is Phil Posner. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Concord
Hi,
Housing
Phil.
Development Corporation in Cleveland, Lawsbrook Road. In the effort to be brief, I would say first to remind the Select Board that it's not actually setting a precedent. It's simply exercising its discretion as to whether or not it chooses to proceed in this fashion or not. It would not necessarily be binding again, or it could come up in discussion. But each time around when the Select Board makes a decision of this nature, it reviews it fresh. I'll also say affordable housing is a very hard undertaking. I'm learning that in my service on this board. And when opportunities present themselves that might offset the costs that have come up as a result of trying to pursue an ambitious project, I think it's always a good idea to let the folks in the town have an opportunity to weigh in. So it strikes me that this is a good opportunity for people to review the project, see whether or not this is beneficial, whether or not it makes sense, and let them have their say. And if, in fact, this seems to be something that's appealing to voters at town meeting, then you'll have an opportunity to hear that.
Thanks, Phil. Any additional comments? Okay. Where are we, guys?
My sense is the advantage is we were discussing the difficulty of scheduling everything else. If you kind of toss it out and go get the signatures and whatever, at least this way we have, I think, a little bit more control. So personally, I would be voting in favor of the special town meeting, but I'm not in a position, I'm not taking a position on the warrant yet, because I think that there's a lot
Not even
of
up for discussion.
further detail and information, but I think to have a meeting, a town meeting, is there's a good enough reason for it, is my feeling.
Strang.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think we should be focused on the merits or supporting, because the outcome at a town meeting could change, amendments, could.
A lot of information is still
Totally
enough to
different,
be discussed.
But it does give us that level of control with the schedule as it is.
Alice?
So, I think what Terry talked about has merit, and it resonated some with me in terms of the process of town meeting, special town meeting. I think that, given the conversation, that the petitioner in this case could go and easily get 100 signatures, just 100 signatures to bring.
I'm sorry, it's 200 to force a special
Oh, to
town
force
meeting,
it,
100 to put a petition article on there.
Is that all, can that happen all at once? If you have
So
200?
essentially, the first person has to get 200 signatures.
You have to get that, because then
Some-
we would say, okay, we've got the certificate, we're gonna have a town meeting, and here's the timetable.
Yeah, okay. So given that, I think that it would, I would not be opposed to holding a special town meeting, and for us to control the dates of holding it. I think the bar for having a citizen petition to bring a town meeting to the town is low enough that it could occur even without our pre-approval. So I'm thinking that I would have no reason to not support.
All right, so let me raise the second question, and that is, you have in your packets a particular timetable that has been vetted with the town manager, the clerk, and the finance director, is that correct?
Correct.
And it sort of works. We could do one of a number of things. We could vote this evening to decide we're going to have a special town meeting, but not vote on a particular timetable. Or we could do everything all together, or we could do nothing and postpone all of our decision, even though we seem to be supportive of it, to give other folks a chance, if they wish to, let us know what their opinions are, and we could put that off to the 12th, as long as we could be clear to the petitioners where we are on the matter, so it's not like, who knows what's going on. So let me ask you that question.
I mean, it seems to me that I don't see why we don't just say the special town meeting December 8th. Say we're gonna hold it, give them the date, and then it allows people to start having the discussion and preparing for the meeting.
All right, fine, Steve?
If the 200 signatures were submitted, what's the timetable for that? Like, are we stuck into a schedule?
I think the board has to call the special town meeting within 45 days of receipt of a petition. It isn't clear to me if you could call it within 45 days and schedule it beyond 45 days, or you have to call it and hold it within 45 days. I don't mean to catch you off guard. The statute's on the.
Yeah, it's not an answer I have on top of my head.
Welcome back.
Don't you have an app for that?
But
So it's a,
independent
there's a
of the
set,
specifics, the
there is a
risk
set
that
time.
Tom has raised before of, they go get petitioned, but somehow they don't get all of the signatures until 4 weeks from now or something like that, and
I think
we have to,
you have to take action within 45 days.
45 days, we may not be able to adhere to this calendar.
Right.
And we do know that independently, the fall is really busy.
Yes.
So there's not going to be a lot of time.
Right. That speaks to Mr. McKean's
Yeah.
point of that you would
Okay,
control.
so Tom is in favor of just moving right ahead, voting to call it, set the date. Steve?
Yeah, I would agree the same. I think Mr. McBride, if we were given the 200 signatures, we're kind of forced into a different timetable, which, I don't think we have as much flexibility with.
So do the whole thing this evening.
Yeah, I would support that.
So, looking at what is customary in Concord, there is a lot of activity that's required by the planning board, since there are zoning amendments that are being, or zoning articles that are going to come forward. Recommendations by the planning board, the selectmen's hearing. So all of these hearings and meetings are scheduled at a pretty prime time that I'd like to be able to control those dates and not have it driven by a calendar set out for special town meeting. And if these proposed hearing dates and planning board reports are doable from the town's perspective,
They are.
then I'm thinking I'd just assume not turn this whole town schedule topsy-turvy.
Okay, so Chris, let me ask you a question then. And that is, if we proceed as it appears that everybody is supportive of, in terms of the, it would be just to set the special town meeting? Do we have to state when the warrant will be opened and when the warrant will be closed? And
Well, candidly, I liked your idea that today would be the day you would discuss this and signal your general support for the idea, and then hear from the community, a larger portion of the community, if there's any good reason, allow us to check the religious holidays to see if there's any conflicts, make sure the traditional meeting places are available, and then take a formal vote at your meeting on September 12th or at your future. That's what I would recommend.
well, I'm looking at you, Jack. I wanted to understand how that might impact him. I think that's a smart thing to do, but I think what we could do this evening is sort of then announce our intent, right? Maybe we don't take a vote, but I think given the way the board has responded, we could announce our intent at our September 12th selectmen's meeting, which I'll remind everybody is again at, is it at 5 o'clock? It's again at 5 o'clock, is that correct? Because we have to adjourn and then go to an Acton town meeting at 7 o'clock. So this won't be a motion then, but I will state then for the record that on the 12th, it's going to be our intent to set a special town meeting to be held on December 8th, and with specific dates for the warrant opening and closing and public hearings, and make sure that this is already posted. This, I'm sorry, pointing with my iPad, but what I mean is the calendar, to make sure that this is posted again on our website so that anybody who would want to could look and check these dates out. Does that seem like a reasonable approach to you?
I think that's a great idea.
All right, and Mr. McBride, that will,
Thank you very much.
you can live with that?
Yeah, we've tried to work cooperatively with them.
Absolutely.
That since I moved to town, and I really appreciate Terry's comments too, the positive ones. Working with all the different boards, and I'm just hopeful that how it turns out, that it works.
Well, I thank you for coming, Mr. Hurley, as well, and thank you all for the citizens who provided your input. It's greatly appreciated. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Do you want to say something?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I know you have a couple of more items on your agenda, but Marcia received some good news while you were discussing other matters from the...
Please tell us, good news is always...
You can go.
Mr. Chair, again, for the record, Nina Macarius, Anderson and Krieger, Town Council. Is at 6:24, because it's by email. Marcia and Chris received an email from Mr. Canty, one of the owners of 4B Commonwealth, which was a property that you voted a substantive taking, as I was referring to it, stating that he and the other owners of the property have he identifies 4 owners of Wood Hill Table.
Woods Hill
Yeah, Woods Hill Table, so the restaurant at least, got together and decided that they in fact would like to donate the easement property. As a reminder, that was the taking you have already voted on, so the vote is still valid. So there's a few procedural steps that I think we would need to take to try to make that happen. One, I want to be candid, Mr. Canty's email comes from him to 2 town staff. It does not include his attorney, it doesn't include the other owners, so I don't want to misspeak. He is represented by counsel.
Well, this will be, the action we took this evening will continue to be valid until,
Yes, the right does not vest in the town, though, until recording anyway. So what I would propose, what I would recommend to the board is that you take one more vote tonight, which is a vote on a broader version of the vote regarding private properties that you had voted previously, which would then authorize the town manager and town council to work with Marcia and Mr. Canty and the other owners to try to finalize a permanent easement agreement and a temporary. You already gave him the authority on
and
the
that would
temporary
need to be done tomorrow, or the vote we
Well,
took.
tomorrow, so that we can record all of this within MassDOT's timeline. We can also explain the situation to MassDOT and
Isn't
see
it
if there's any.
possible in an eminent domain taking that essentially you could refuse the payment?
That is also another option. It's possible there's associated waivers that would have to go with that. So one thing I would like the opportunity to do tomorrow is figure out the cleanest way to do that. I also don't know from Mr. Canty's email whether he means he would like to donate under the terms which I had described to you may have been problematic for the town under
So then
terms
would you
otherwise-
read for us what the motion is you would like us to
Sure.
take
What
action
I
on?
would like you to vote on is I can hand a copy of it around.
You do have it in writing?
I have added to the prior one. It's the motion you voted on under item 4, I believe. The private property owner, or sorry, it was 5, wasn't it?
No, it's,
It's item number
Item
5.
five.
Yes,
Item five.
but with the addition within the private property of 4B Commonwealth. So, Mr. McKean, just for a second. No vote yet, so.
so we would essentially be amending,
Just wanted to see the
You'd be
language.
amending, but I would consider this a separate vote because until we, which will allow us to, we will want to
Okay,
use the
okay,
other
okay.
vote to be able to record all the other
So-
properties tomorrow.
can you read then?
Sure, once I get that back.
I'm sorry.
When you read the motion that you would like us to
Sure.
adopt?
The proposed motion would be to vote on a separate order regarding, not order, separate motion to accept easements from private property owners, including, in this case, a permanent easement from 4B Commonwealth in the form of vote that I will provide to the board, which, the substance of which would mean that the town manager can agree to an easement in substantially the form that the board has accepted for the other easements, so leaving still some discretion not to accept terms that are inappropriate. And this would give us, hopefully tomorrow, we can then have the conversation with Mr. Canty and his attorney to see if this is truly what they want to do. Your taking would still be valid so that you have that backup option.
Protected.
It also, you are protected in that sense. We also intend to first, to the degree we can get a hold of the right people, have a conversation with MassDOT, explain the situation. Although they're very tight about these deadlines, there is $129,000 worth
yeah.
of donated value here.
All
So
right, so you've heard the motion. Could I get a so moved from
So
somebody?
moved.
I'll second that.
Before we vote, though, is there, we signed a number of articles this evening. Is
Right.
there another?
my suggestion for this evening is that you sign a form of the vote that you, one including the different property owners, that now includes 4B Commonwealth as one of the private property owners. In the event we need to record this, I think your vote, based on the motion, would be clear that you have now authorized that, and it will be reflected in the minutes, so that's certainly enough. But for recording purposes, it might also be helpful to have that.
So
And that's a yes, yeah.
Now they can
who's
sign.
going to generate this?
It's
right
the
here.
handwritten edition.
It's the handwritten
Oh,
piece.
would
And
that,
that's acceptable.
that's acceptable?
It may be,
Oh,
I
yeah.
can't, it should be with the, usually
Where-
is.
whose machine is this on?
If you have it
The signature page is separate from the content.
Right.
So it can be edited and we still have a valid signature
So why don't we
page.
sign the signature page
I
and
believe
then
Mr. McKean has.
charge you,
And the
somebody
town-
with generating the appropriate cover consistent with the motion that we're now ready to vote on. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And thanks to both of you again, and
Not
I
us.
think we're all pleased with that
That's
outcome.
And to Mr.
So we hope to
Canty.
finalize that so that the outcome is actually.
That's really good news.
That's a very nice gesture from the Cantys.
Huh?
That was a nice gesture from the Cantys.
That was
Appreciate it
very
very
nice
much,
gesture
and
from
We
the
may
Canty.
switch them to the letter of appreciation.
Yeah. No, but that was really,
Yep.
Okay,
great.
town manager evaluation and goals. Can I make one, Mr. Grom, do you have a comment? Do either of you have a comment that you want to make? We've kept you here for a long time.
I have a comment about it.
Why don't you come up and comment? And then you can go on about your business, and
Okay,
you're welcome to stay, of course.
okay, yeah, no, I understand. I have a comment about,
Identify yourself for the record.
oh, sorry, Paul Jameson of College Road. I have a comment about the proposed lease of a part of town land to the developer of Concord Market
Yes.
because I believe that the lease is nominally a 10-year lease, but this is a false statement. This is a lease to transform land, to remove trees, I believe, it's not clear how many trees, and to pave over the land. It represents, in a practical sense, a permanent change of the land. And it says, we are providing 7 parking spaces. We have decided that parking spaces are more important than trees. And I believe this is a decision, this is a value judgment that should be made by a town meeting. It should not be set up in such a way as to avoid a town meeting for the convenience of a developer. And it seems to have been set up that way.
I appreciate your comment. I don't appreciate your characterization that there was some intent to avoid a town meeting. I just don't. I get your point about trees and parking spots.
Okay.
That trade-off is
But
is
how
important.
was, initially, the talk was of a 20-year lease, and then the developer preferred a 10-year lease, so the town manager then said, as I understand it, oh, okay, yes, we'll give you a 10-year lease.
Well,
There was
the
no
way you
reason-
should understand it is that the planning board has the authority and responsibility to determine the length of leases and the conditions of leases. They could have said anything about the duration of a lease or the conditions of a lease. They said, I don't know what the conditions are, I apologize for not knowing. They said a 10-year lease. They recommended that to the zoning board of appeals, and the zoning board of appeals said a 10-year lease.
Okay.
And so I think it's a valid point to say, gee whiz, I don't like this decision, but I don't think anybody was trying to avoid anything. I think they have the responsibility to do that.
I would assert the planning board was dissembling to say that this is a 10-year lease. It's not a 10-year lease, it's a lease forever, or however long the paving lasts. I'm sure there's no plan on the part of the developer to take up the trees and plant them somewhere so that they'd be ready to be replaced at the end of the 10-year period, or to have zippers under the paving so that the paving could be removed.
I said, I
mean,
didn't read
it's
the
for-
terms, so I understand the point. But again, if the
it's a
10-year.
permanent change, and
it's
it
not,
should
it's
go,
not
and it
necess-
says, trees are more valuable, parking spots are more valuable to the town than the trees and the wetland, and the wetland. And I think that's clearly a mistake.
I think
That's
what you're
something for
saying,
the
if I
town.
understand it, was you don't like the decision.
Well, that's true, yes.
I get it, and I think that's a perfectly legitimate point. I just don't like the characterization that somebody was trying to avoid going to town meeting.
But it certainly has that effect.
Yes, it does.
Mr. Jameson, did you attend those meetings? You had the right to speak and voice your opinion.
I
at those
realized
meetings.
I did. No, I did
And?
not attend those meetings.
Why not? You have a very strong opinion about it, and I think that could
didn't-
have,
I didn't.
the planning board would have appreciated that opinion at that time. They met multiple times. The zoning board of appeals met twice before they rendered a decision.
But you're talking about elements of the town government, which are influenced by the town manager, they're influenced by the developer. I mean, I can see, just from my experience here, being in one of these meetings for about the second time, that developers play a very significant role. Hardly anybody from the town is here. The developer comes, he wants something. Gee, everybody agrees. Yeah, we'll give you everybody's leaning toward a special town
Well,
meeting.
in fairness.
That's what it looks like to me.
In fairness, it depends upon, I think, I mean, there are a lot of different aspects that go into it. I don't think we want to necessarily be hostile to people who are trying to, in their minds and in the minds of others, make improvements. I don't disagree with you. In fact, I raised that I think that, what's a long-term lease and what's a short-term lease shouldn't be based upon the number of years. It should be based upon what you're doing to the property itself. Mm-hmm. But those decisions had been made at a kind of an earlier time with open meetings. There was nothing sort of hurried through or not transparent. The public had a right to be there. I don't necessarily agree with the decision either, but that's, we're not the ones who then come and say, okay, we don't agree with your decision, and therefore we want to change it. It seems to me if you have an open process, you've got to follow that open process. You have dedicated people who are focused on trying to do their job as they see it. You should join one of fill out the green card and become a committee member. We need people.
Okay.
And have your
I may
voice.
not be very popular.
Well, but that's fine. You'd be surprised.
But there's
Thank you.
Implied in what you said that I think is important and something that I think as a board we might want to explore at a later time is the trade-off the town's making in terms of its granting of waivers for parking, forgetting the lease thing. Mm-hmm. It's parking that you're concerned about. And I think that has occurred, and I think I've heard from folks who've said, I think we've maybe gone too far. So I think that's a perfectly legitimate topic.
That
I think it's also a point to be made that if you want a point of view, your perspective about this long-term leases and the way we talk, there's a way to move that forward. It may not have any impact on the decision that was just made, but certainly an article at town meeting that would redefine how we do this is, not suggesting you do it, but that's the way to, I think that's the way to sort of approach this matter of saying, I can't think about the decision that was made, I may not like it, but I think that this is not the way we should be doing it. And here's a better way to do it. I think that's, but it's suggesting intent to circumvent or not follow the procedures and rules that the town has for making this decision. I don't think that's helpful. Thanks for coming. We're sorry we kept you for so long before you got a chance to talk. Mr. Town Manager.
Perhaps this is an unfortunate time to do the town manager's evaluation.
Let me tell you the process for everything. We hear from the town manager about his goals. My suggestion is, given the hour, that we hear about them. If there's any questions, let's ask them, but that we have a more fulsome discussion the next time we meet on the 12th. And as you will recall, I asked each one of you to fill out an evaluation for the town manager. And so what I will do is, not for distribution yet, I will circulate the conclusions that I can draw from those things, make them available to you for comments. Then after we have discussed the town manager's points of view, I'll meet with the town manager, show him the evaluation, and then we'll make it public at a subsequent selectmen's meeting. Does that seem like a reasonable?
Yeah.
So, Chris, please.
So I'll just mention that I've used the board's goals structure and tried to connect my goals to the format that the board used in terms of effective governance and organizational effectiveness and communication and so on and so forth. I'll mention that one of the goals is I'm aware of my item number 3 there under the first category, replace highly qualified people. I'm aware of 3 significant employees below the level of department head that are thinking about retiring in the next 12 before July 1st. I got a call, couple of calls from people about how do we do it with our finding a finance director, because other communities are having a tremendously hard time finding. So we're very fortunate that Kerry will be coming. We found a suitable replacement for her, but the economy is getting good, which is great. But that means the private sector can be more attractive to candidates, and we have to work hard to attract those folks. So that really will. I don't want to understate that. It's not just a routine replacement of somebody who's retiring. It's a challenge to find capable folks in this field. So, and then implementing the decisions that made it the number 5 is the town meeting, implementing the decisions of town meeting. We've made a good start on some of those things, including the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And so hopefully we're in a position to, actually it's wonderful that we might just see construction starting a year from now, which would be great. I've included mentoring the new finance director and making sure she gets off to a good start. And under financial stability, the no override budget, which was one of the board's goals. Discussing financial contributions from tax exempt entities, that comes up from time to time, and I don't know if that's a goal that we share, but we have had sporadic gifts from Middlesex and Concord Academy in particular, and they've been good about it, but I don't know if it's sort of a little bit reactive to opportunities that come along, such as the sidewalk on Lowell Road, which was wonderful. It was fairly expensive for Middlesex, but maybe we could look at ways to...
The track.
The track?
In Middlesex.
Yep, yep, that's right. They did, they came with, contributed to that effort, which is great, the equipment. I don't know if there are other things. I do want to follow up on the unique character and historical heritage, the capital asset management, we have to make sure the state has passed the legislation to get us that 1/4 acre of land, I think it is, on Com Ave, near where the rail trail intersects Com Ave. But now we have to make sure it's a priority for the bureaucrats at the state, if you will, to follow through. So that's a goal that I have. Continue the discussion with White Pond Beach Association, sort of evaluate how that program worked this summer, and see if we can, improve upon it next year. And pursue the analysis of the Benson House and work to find the location. And then I kind of petered out at the end there on regional state interests. It was a first shot, so I welcome any additional goals the board wants to identify.
Well, terrific. Comments or questions that we want to ask this evening? Or I think that I'll just mention the one, which is the contribution for tax exempt entities. I mean, it comes up. I remember it coming up when I was in the finance committee, and I think it's come up. It's a great idea, but and I wish it was something that could happen because it could mean significant resources. But there's a real difference between organizations like the schools and then churches. And,
oh, yeah, I agree. Yep,
I think it's, with a bad analogy, it's kind of like the sign thing. You can't get in the business of saying, well, there's these nonprofits over here that we should be trying to get some funds from, and then there's these nonprofits over here. So I'm happy to have the discussion, but I think it's a tricky one to do. All right, so let me ask you to do the following, not you, Chris, but please review these carefully, and let's come back, and I'd like to go over them categorically, because they are, as Chris said, aligned with the way we presented our goals, and to make sure that there's not only alignment, but if we have something on our template and it's not on Chris's or vice versa, we want to try to figure out how come, so we're not running off like this doing crazy stuff. All right, does that seem reasonable?
Very good.
Okay, thank you very much for getting that done, Chris. I do appreciate it. Miscellaneous correspondence, I don't have any. I will say, I wrote you all an email. I took my first attempt at being the clip monitor.
Yeah.
So I'll continue to do that. The clip's gonna stay here though, so please feel free to come in. The one exception to the way we're thinking about doing this now is when we've got minutes, because they need
to be done.
your vote after the clerk has reviewed them to get it done. So my job will be, when Andrew has placed the minutes in the clip, to make sure you know you gotta come in and do that. I will, at a subsequent meeting though, ask us to adopt a new policy, which I think I mentioned last time, so I want to get it codified. They're going to be in the clip, they'll be in the clip no longer than 2 weeks, as long as there is a majority. So if 3 of us have signed off on the minutes and 2 weeks lapses, we're done, right?
Okay.
So I'll get that codified as an item, but it seems to me Jane reviews them all before they go in the clip, and so I don't want these to back up on us. Right. Okay, so public comments. Bob, do you have anything? You sure?
Nothing at all tonight.
We get a gold star. You get a gold star.
The Olympics are calling.
Yeah.
Well, you get a gold star for hanging out for the whole meeting. Liaison reports.
I have nothing this evening.
I have nothing this evening.
I have nothing.
Well, I do have something, but I'll make it very. I attended the Hugh Cargill Trust, and they are going to be. We're setting up a meeting with the Hugh Cargill folks, the tax relief people, and some of the folks who have been administering the silent fund, to make sure we're working on a new set of processes to be able to manage that fund effectively. That's it, committee nominations. We have committee appointments. We have a list of election officers, so I would entertain a motion.
Move to appoint election officers listed in the memo from the town clerk dated August 15th, 2016, all for terms to run from September 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2017.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Aye. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.